Hello and welcome back to another episode. Now today I want to talk a little bit about my love of Batman Begins. Now of course it is part of the wonderful Dark Knight trilogy, but for me Batman Begins is the best of the three. Now many people go, what? No, the Dark Knight, that's the best of the three. And of course I have the Dark Knight trilogy box set. It's a wonderful box set. I love the way that the cover shifts as you move it. But for me the first one is the best one. Of course, Heath Ledger's performance as the Joker in the second film is brilliant. Christian Bale continues to be the immovable object, which is the Batman, and the portrayal of those two characters going up against each other and the build-up to that is wonderful. Just like Heat, where was it Pacino and De Niro facing off against each other in this crime thriller, which actually was the inspiration for The Dark Knight. It is a brilliant film. But personally, and this is just my opinion, Batman Begins is the better of the three films, the best of the three. Now the reason for this is partly because of how and when I saw it. Now obviously that's why it's an opinion. And it's because obviously it came out after the immense disappointment, many years after the immense disappointment that was Batman and Robin. And Batman and Robin was such a bad film. I remember seeing it as a teenager and coming out, actually, I think I saw it with my mum, actually, I was a very young teenager, coming out of the film, pretending to be a Thunderbirds puppet, because I thought, blimey now, I could have done that film better. A Thunderbirds puppet could have been a better actor than half the actors in that film. Certainly, at least the script and the writing. I mean, for example, Batman slides down the back of a dinosaur in a bat costume and feels the need to say, "Hi, Freeze, I'm Batman." Of course you're freaking Batman, you're wearing a bat costume. Yeah. Anyway, so after that massive disappointment, we have the Batman Begins, the beginning of this trilogy. But at the time, there was only one film planned, and I went to see it. Now, at the time, my instincts regarding films weren't that great, because I remember a couple of years before that, seeing on the front of a cereal packet a promotion for the upcoming Lord of the Rings trilogy. Get a toy in this cereal box, and I thought, oh, that's going to be rubbish. Live action Lord of the Rings? No. But it's great. And the same goes for this Batman film. When I heard about it, when I started to see trailers for this film, I was very sceptical. I thought, it's going to be rubbish. They're not going to do it justice. It's going to be Hollywood. It's going to be just like Batman and Robin. And boy, was I wrong. And that's, again, part of the reason why I love this film, is because it proved that a superhero film, a Batman film, can elevate to something else entirely. Arguably, the Spider-Man franchise had sort of started to achieve that, but really, Batman Begins really lifted the bar for superhero films. Now, it's not just because of how and when I saw it, because I remember going down to the cinema as a student and watching this thing and being amazed by it, and we'll come back to that in a moment. But it's also because the film is a perfect little film. It's an essay, actually, about fear. It's about why we get scared, who uses fear to oppress or intimidate or even free other people, how you can overcome your fears, how you can use your own fear as a strength. The whole film is about fear. So whether it's the Falcone family and their intimidation of Gotham and keeping certain parts of Gotham down and under their control, the police force, for example, under their control, whether it's about the League of Shadows and their use of fear and their tactics, their machinations in the background, or whether it's about Batman and actually Bruce Wayne himself. There's far more Bruce in this film than there is Batman, overcoming his own fears and actually deciding to use and channel those fears for the greater good, and to, as he puts it, to become a symbol that people can rally behind, and which the criminals of Gotham will fear. The use of fear and its manipulation is the subject of this film, and the very fact that you have the main bad guy, the main baddie, is the Scarecrow, portrayed by Cillian Murphy, brilliantly, actually, a brilliant performance. Really underlines that theme of fear. This film is about fear, and it tackles fear from all these different angles and does it so well, with a tight story and with a focus on character and also action, which is a hard tightrope to walk, especially in this, given that this is a reboot following the disastrous Batman and Robin. So that's the reason why I love this film, is because you get such a rounded sense of the issues, of the themes, and you could tell that the filmmakers, Chris Nolan, the director, was just basking in the psychology of Batman and enjoying the fact that he had found a reason, a plausible reason, to actually have a man in a bat costume running around in Gotham, intimidating thugs and criminals, and that is because he wants to use fear against those who prey on the fearful. Again, a line from the film. It's of course sort of proves the pedigree of Nolan as well, in so much as he'd made Memento prior to this. He went on to make films like The Prestige, which I'm sure I'll talk about on this channel at some point, and of course Inception. He is the master of filmmaking for psychological impact, but also using film in the way that only film can be used to tell a story. Like, you can't chop and change quite so easily in a book, for example, from one time period to another and have the narrative flow so smoothly. You certainly can't do that, for example, on stage in a play, or using music. Film is brilliant at doing that, and Nolan uses film masterfully to hop between Bruce as a child, Bruce as an adolescent, Bruce training, and Bruce as Batman, Bruce learning to be Batman. And actually, on that front, this film takes some wonderful cues out of Batman Year One. The casting of Gary Oldman in this film as Jim Gordon is just spot on. He looks and is Jim Gordon from the Frank Miller Batman Year One. He's just perfect for the role. To a certain extent, actually, Christian Bale has the physicality of Bruce Wayne, which certainly I had grown up reading. For example, in Batman Year 2, he looks just a little bit like, and I suppose you might say a little bit neutral in terms of his facial features. He looks a little bit like Bruce in the comics. The casting of Alfred was a surprise to me, but nonetheless, Michael Caine pulled it off with aplomb, and he went on to be brilliant in the other two films. And so on. They really thought about how they were going to construct this film, and it just works. It just works. And the fact that you get to see Lieutenant Gordon, you get to see Gotham in the grips of corruption. His relationship with Flass, who is also actually a character from Batman Year One, is portrayed brilliantly when Flass is sort of saying, "Well, you don't want to take a taste of the action," when he's going around taking protection money, and Gordon is trying to keep his hands clean in a really filthy city. And again, these themes are touched on very cleverly in the third film, in The Dark Knight Rises. Gordon expresses his gratitude that Batman was the person who could thrust his hand into the filth when he couldn't do it. He didn't want to do it. And in that sense, obviously, yes, all three films work together rather well. But at this point, the first film was planned and conceived on its own as a sort of lead into, possibly, the Tim Burton film. There's a hint that the Joker's coming at the end of Batman Begins. Gordon holds up a Joker card to Batman, and Batman goes, something like, yeah, I'll look into it. And arguably that could have led into the Jack Nicholson film, with Jack Nicholson as the Joker. At that point, it was just that kind of prequel, but it was all that kind of reboot. But it was brilliantly done, and that's why I love it. I love that film. It's a clever film, it's a focused film, and it's a film which doesn't sacrifice on the character from the comic, really, for the sake of ratings, but it also doesn't sacrifice, actually, the character of Bruce for the sake of getting him in the costume. You have an awful lot of time with Bruce Wayne in this film. You get to know his motivations, his fears, and because of that, you are with him when he cracks his fears and when he becomes the Batman. So there you go, that's just my take on Batman. Now, very briefly, I remember after I first saw this film, I actually was mugged. On the way home from the cinema, I was walking up a place called North Road, in Durham City, and this guy turns around and goes, "What, you looking at me, man?" No. "No, I'm not," I said, and he just knocked me to the ground. His mates mugged me, took my mobile phone and all that kind of thing. But up until that moment, I was having a magical evening, and to a certain extent I still was. I kind of walked off to a friend's house in a bit of a daze, my jacket all torn, my nose bleeding, sort of. But I was still, I've just actually seen Batman on screen for the first time in years, and it was good. So I went back a couple of days later and re-watched the film, and this time I wasn't mugged on the way home. So actually these two films are sort of these two events are inextricably connected in my mind, being mugged and watching Batman Begins. But as soon as it came out on DVD, I was watching it religiously, and I sort of still do. Hence me having this beautiful box set. Yeah. I love it. Anyway, hopefully this video has been interesting for you, and if you have any thoughts or memories or just fond observations to make about Batman Begins, please do comment below. I'd love to read them. I love this film. I absolutely love Batman Begins, and I'm really pleased that it led on to greater things. It led on to the trilogy, and arguably now has led to a situation where now we can take a step back from that super real Batman, as in the real Batman, realistic Batman, and go a bit more towards the comic in the guise of Batman vs Superman and the casting of Ben Affleck. It looks like they're going a bit more towards the comics with him. But this rescued Batman. This film really rescued him from a pretty dark place after Batman and Robin. Anyway, as ever, until next time, do take care. Bye bye.